for our final presentation, we thought we'd do something a little different this year. Rather than having a speaker, that we would have a discussion instead. And one of the things that has been a constant theme throughout the day-to-day has been change and innovation in the food, beverage, and agriculture space. And so we're going to have a very informal discussion here, and although we're arranged up here, that's just so that you can see us. It's not that we're holding ourselves up in some exalted level. So I'm hopeful that this will be a conversation with all of you too. So please jump in, raise your hand, ask questions, etc. Our fourth, not really panelist, but our fourth participant in this discussion, George Sent, will be back in a little bit. He just has not returned yet, so he'll be here shortly. In the meantime, I know that those of you who are in this room for the blockchain panel had an opportunity to be introduced to Tyler Mulvihill from Viant. Tyler is an entrepreneur, is a specialist in blockchain, as well as a number of other technologies that are related to that, and he can describe what they're doing a little bit more. And for those of you who were in the GMO panel, rather than the blockchain panel, he could tell you about their efforts in food traceability and the new applications. I think a lot of us have heard about blockchain, for example, without knowing when it made sense, what it does, and what are the practical applications. And we're not going to limit the discussion, but I think Tyler has one of his interests is really where are we headed with whether it's blockchain or new technologies or the industry as a whole, and he has great perspectives. To my left is Tom O'Brien, the General Counsel of Driscoll's, the berry people from Watsonville, California. Tom presides over the legal functions of what seems like you think of it, you say, well, that's kind of old line. I mean, growing something and marketing it, but doing it in ways that really capture changes in the marketplace that he'll talk about, and some of the dynamics that maybe some of us don't think about, changing land use and prices, et cetera. And so do you shift gears to go organic to take advantage of higher input costs, et cetera, and see where that goes. And I'm hopeful, although I'm not sure that, and when George Sent from Cascadia Capital is a longtime expert in the food space and is an investor in many of the startups that are popping up in the space, and has a great perspective on this as well. So when George arrives, he'll add his perspective. And we're not going to limit this conversation to any particular technology or any particular product. And I think to the extent we can, we may venture into cell-based or clean meat. We may talk about repurposing food waste, which is a big area, into sustainability, into environmental stewardship, so we can go a number of different directions. But this is something where I'd very much encourage all of you to participate. As we started out the day, this is both a time of great disruption, which is disconcerting to companies. I think in the plenary session that opened up, the example was of Campbell Soup. And I think George talked about being at a conference where there were a lot of people who looked pretty shell-shocked and were wondering where they were going to be sending their resumes, because the stable, long-time businesses in this area are finding themselves under attack like never before. The flip side of that, though, is it maybe the most exciting time there ever has been in this industry. There are abundant opportunities, and it's more democratized. A theme that I've been hearing, whereas previously it was the large entrants who had the distribution networks, who had the financial muscle, who had the relationships and the pricing power that they could squeeze out new entrants. And today, where new entrants are popping up all over, there are all kinds of new delivery channels and new consumer demands in submarkets. It's really a wide open field. So I mean, I'm a mere lawyer, so I shouldn't be talking about this stuff. But Tyler, why don't you tell us, start off just kind of the lay of the land where you see us today, and then some of the things as you've been thinking about this, where you see the opportunities and the threats.
Sure. So by way of background, I spent better part of a decade at Deloitte before joining Consensus. So I have a traditional management consulting background, and I took law in college, and I got an A. But that was about the end of that.
See, that's why you didn't become a lawyer.
Yeah, no, I wasn't smart enough. I couldn't read fast enough. So when I joined Consensus in 2016 after standing up a fintech practice at Deloitte. So I got exposure to all the exponential technologies. So this is blockchain, but also AI, ML, RPA, robotics processing, omni-channel authentication, the whole 9 yards. So I'm going to only probably focus on blockchain, but certainly this is the emergence of exponential technology and a convergence of them. So the EEC, which I call the emergence of exponential convergence. I'm going to patent that one. I need Bridget back here, patent lawyer. So I joined Consensus because I realized that there was this exponential demand for provenance-informed products, and blockchain was a way to prove that to the consumer. So I think at a 50,000-foot view, that's where we're headed. And how to get there, companies and organizations are trying to figure out, and I think blockchain is a very good way of doing that. So I co-founded a company called Viant.io, which is being incubated by the largest startup in the world called Consensus, or largest blockchain startup in the world called Consensus. And I think we'll chat a little bit about the supply chain and provenance implications in a bit.
Great. And Tom O'Brien, for those of you who were learning about blockchain and were not learning about organics and GMOs, as I mentioned, the General Counsel of Driscoll's, and prior to that, worked at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and actually, he says Sherpa, I say draft, was responsible for the initial organic standards, and has some great war stories to tell about that, and has seen the growth of the organics industry, and Driscoll's, as you may know, is a huge producer of both organic and conventional fruit, not only in the United States, but in Australia and in Europe, also Mexico, I guess, in the off-season, and has a great perspective. So, Tom, just as you see it and as you've watched the industry develop, what do you see lying ahead?
Well, first, and George isn't here, but he made a comment this morning about he goes to traditional food companies and they seem so down and demoralized. I just vowed if he ever comes to Driscoll's, if he ever comes to Wattsville, I am smiling. It is going to be the best day in the world. So whether it's true or not, maybe not matter. But I mean, I don't know that I have any great insights on the produce world generally or food in general, but I'll just say a couple of things about sort of where we're focusing on innovation. And at Driscoll's, the company began in the mid-'40s when there were about 5 farm families that had been growing berries in Watsonville for 70 years or so by then. The University of California stopped its breeding program to focus on the war effort, to work on sorghum or something like that. So these strawberry growers said, well, that breeding program, that innovation is really important to us. Let's all chip in and hire those guys who've been released from the University of California, and they can breed plants for us. So that was the nucleus of Driscoll's. And over time, it began to then market the fruit that those growers grew. And so in a way, we've always sort of had innovation at our core. And also, we were talking about this beforehand, in a way, we kind of see ourselves as a technology transfer company. Because those pieces in common didn't include the farms of those original families. They wanted, these were like brothers-in-law and cousins, and last thing they wanted was their brother-in-law to be in their farm business, because that was their main occupation. It was okay to partner on this breeding thing. And that's how we operate today. The growers are independent, and we breed the plants, they grow it, and then we market the fruit. Most of the money goes back to the growers. And so, and the money they get is dependent upon those new varieties. So at Driscoll's, I would say there are kind of 4 areas that we see as where we need to spend our time on innovation. And the first remains what it's always been, and that's the taste of the berries. how do we continue to make better berries? And the fourth one is sort of also focused on the consumer, but on these other things like blockchain or other ways of traceability, packaging, the whole revolution in retailing and what that means for strawberries and other berries that we sell. I should say we have 4 berries. All we do are fresh berries: strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries, and just for the fresh market. They're in clear plastic containers now. One that's becoming increasingly a problem is people are not embracing plastics. But it works for us because they can turn them over, they can make sure the berries are okay. So one, how do we find something in the traditional retail environment that makes that work? And then second of all, what about in online? What is the way that the quality is communicated to somebody who doesn't see the product ahead of time? Does the brand matter? Does it not matter? There are a lot of sort of discussions we have about that, and I've just been. Our board meeting met last couple of days in Washington, so we met with Amazon and their folks at Whole Foods and Costco to talk about some of these things. 2 other issues that are probably more particular to berries or where we are than maybe elsewhere, and that's water and labor. Whenever you ask people in our business what are the main constraints, particularly those in California, it's the availability of water, and we're on the coast, and so we rely on groundwater where there's a lot of intrusion, and labor. There's not enough labor to pick the berries. It's hard work. How can we do things differently? We're experimenting with moving, strawberries grow low to the ground. Can we put them in containers and raise them up, which is how we grow them in Europe, so people can pick standing up. So it's a better, more productive way of working. So those are that's a very long-winded answer to your question. But
No, I think it's great. I'm just curious, when you were in Seattle talking to Amazon, did you get the Jeff Bezos story about how they increased productivity when he was on the floor packing boxes?
Yes,
Okay.
I did.
Is people familiar with this story? So Jeff Bezos, of course, the CEO and founder of Amazon, said that he, and I think he had a partner at the time, they were literally on the floor crawling around packing books in boxes. And it was a bare bones operation. They didn't have a lot of money, and so they were trying not to spend too much. And so Bezos says to the other guy, knee pads, we need to buy knee pads. And the other guy says, no, we need to buy a table. And it was the table that then their productivity went up hugely. So when you talk about putting things, growing strawberries, quote, on a table.
It's just taken the strawberry industry 150 years to get that same lesson that,
Right.
finally, instead of trying to make it better, reaching down, maybe we should lift it up.
Well, and picking up on that, one of the things that I know that there is some experimentation, and both of you may know something about this, is so-called vertical farming. Is that a term that's familiar with everybody here? See some head nods. So, taking...
He probably knows the most. But
All right, Kevin, come on up. You can tell us about vertical farming. But, the notion that you're actually taking a plot of land and building a warehouse or a skyscraper or something and growing on various levels in there. And so it's, you don't need pesticides, it's organic, it's all contained in the apparatus. But, there are obviously technological challenges to doing that. Do you have insights into how that's coming along? Is the technology there?
You probably know more than me.
well, again, my knowledge gets pretty limited pretty fast.
Oh, come on, no disclaimers here. You just
I know, we call it indoor farming.
Okay.
That it's easiest and works best in leafy greens so far. At least that's where it seems like the knowledge is advanced the most. But you see in other environments like tomatoes, where you can have a stack in a greenhouse at least, a tomato that's 20 feet high or so, producing berry. It's amazing. And so we spend, we look at it, we wonder how it works for us. We'll talk to people who know a lot more about it than we do, because what's attractive about it beyond those attributes is you can grow very close to the market, which then means the berries or whatever it is that you're producing, it has less need to withstand a long truck ride. So you can have that really good thin skinned berry right by the consumer. So,
Interesting. Tyler, you have some insight into this?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think right now what the market is trying to do with this internal growing is really, really high value crops. So microgreens, like the cilantros and the basils that are hard to transport. That's what we're seeing, whether that's anecdotal or not. I don't have the stats. But what could be interesting is that you can track a lot of this stuff a lot easier, whether it be how much water you use or how little pesticides you use, or you can also train people using AI, or not AI, sorry, augmented reality, so that they can just walk into your warehouse with no previous training. They put on goggles and then they say, turn this knob, go to this pressure pump, see if it's high or low, augment it, pick these if they're above this much. Here's go. So you can start getting a lot more efficient and use a labor pool that is a lot more distributed and broad than you could previously.
to one point you raised, but in the organic community, there's a lengthy debate that's been kicked off about is this organic or not, along with hydroponics and even growing in containers. And so there's a lot of thinking through, is it organic or not? What does that mean in this context? So, and it will probably continue for years to come, knowing the organic industry.
Can I ask you a provocative question, a follow-up?
You're talking to him, right?
No, you.
Just getting worried.
So certification bodies, it's a stamp of approval based on a checklist which most people may or may not know, but they trust the certification more broadly. But is there a future where so much data is captured that there's just a bunch of data out there, and then the individuals can put their preferences, and that innately will be their personalized certification rather than having broad certifications?
I mean, certainly that seems to be where blockchain and artificial intelligence and others, in terms of pulling that data
We just
through.
get the data, but then it's up to the individual. Like, do you see a future where there's no certified organic, rather an individual says, I say that organic is without containers, or I say organic is, yeah, sure, containers, I don't care.
So it's like an individualized
It's an
shopping
individualized
Yeah.
certification.
cart. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly could be the case. It's always interesting to me thinking about why is it people buy organics, because I do think it's a complex set of reasons that different consumers have different things, that they've accepted organic as meeting those needs.
Yes.
And is the knowledge great enough to know, here's what I want, and this gets me what I want? Or is that larger? And organics goes a little beyond the checklist to the systems approach.
Auditing,
Is that what I'm after?
reporting. Yeah.
So it's a good question. It very well could be. I mean, certainly there'll be a lot more tailoring to individuals. That seems to be everything we do, and that's kind of what Amazon was talking about and others in the last few days. In those conversations I was taking part in, but exactly how that works.
Manifest, I don't know either. Yeah.
What about, since you were talking about Amazon, the natural segue from there before we turn more to technology in particular is distribution channels. There was a great presentation at the plenary session about how the channels of distribution have changed from the traditional, producer, middleman, market, and all the rest. What is technology and consumer preference going to enable going forward in terms of means of distribution? I mean, whether it's grown, locally and comes down the elevator to you, or delivered to your refrigerator, in your window by drone, or whatever the case. What have people been talking about? What do you see happening in that space?
I guess
Yeah.
I'll start.
Thinking through my answer.
I mean, in the produce industry, we're just getting past the middleman thing. It used to be all produce went to terminal markets, from there went to retail, and then now everything goes directly to retail. And I think the answer to your question really depends on what is retail in the future. We would like to be closer to consumers for these other reasons, but even if indoor farming worked, it probably would be shipping to, having someplace in upstate New York that ships to Wegmans or something like that. But as that world changes, and as the online customers want 2-hour delivery in a vast network, I don't know the answer to how we figure out how we get that product in so many locations so quickly. And maybe it goes back to kind of the terminal market, having those middlemen who dispense it out. As things have consolidated into the retail world, maybe they'll break apart again.
You've had some extra time to think about this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
better be
No, that's
Yeah,
a great,
I know.
That's a whole white paper answer right there. That's fantastic. So obviously my answer is going to depend on the future of AI and drones and the whole 9 yards. But right now we operate under an organizational kind of construct that's siloed. So some organizations have some information, and the coordination efforts between them are really high because that data is, and that internal processes to those organizations are kind of confined to the organization. So if you can start building processes very, very quickly where the rules are written and everyone agrees to them in the whole supply chain, and you enable self-organization of those organizations, so retailer, distributor, drone, mailman, whoever it is, to accomplish a goal, if you can enable the world to self-organize, then basically it's whatever we can think up. So if we have a platform where I can say, I want berries in the next 2 hours, I want them to be organic based on my checklist, and I don't care about the carbon footprint, whether it's a drone or a person on a bike, go. And I can blast that out to the world. And then so that's one way, that's what the consumer wants, that's the demand. And the supply is, one, it's going to be the next Google that enables a search of that. So, okay, I have berries. Who in the world is searching for berries? These 8 people. Okay, well, I can only 6 of them meet my criteria, so I can provide 6 of them. Now, who's going to deliver it? Now I open up a market for the delivery people. So anybody who has an Uber rating over 4.5 can participate in delivering those to that consumer.
Is there anybody who has an Uber rating below 4.5?
I think they get kicked off at like 3.9 or something. I have a few friends in New York that definitely don't have a 4 or 5. But so it's a long way of saying that if you can blast out a request and that request can be fulfilled by a mirage of people that aren't necessarily even organizations, but individuals that meet certain criteria, then it's really up to the imagination of the world and the people who want to work and participate in that economy. And that is where you get to a global, inclusive supply chain economy. That's the 30-year view. But
One thing I want to add that strikes me as something we don't yet know is if you look at retailers, they're building their stores a little smaller because they figure the Tide, the detergents they're selling, those things easily go online. But is there a place where people still want to come in and touch the perishable commodities and sort of, does it get left behind in some of this? And I don't think we know the answer to that. And I'm the last one who should be predicting the future. But I think that's kind of an open question. There still may be more, the future may look more the same in some areas than we suppose.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So Tyler, let's talk about technology. I mean, you obviously did in your last answer, but let's start with blockchain, and then if you want to talk about some others. So,
Sure.
It's maybe in its infancy, maybe that isn't the right term in terms of general application, but where do you see it helping in supply chain here? Does it have other applications in the food industry? What other technologies in this particular industry do you see really coming to the fore?
Sure. So by way of background, Viant is a way that business users can just develop a supply chain. So you model a business process, you define what the asset is, you attach attributes to that asset, and this is all drag and drop. So anybody here could build a blockchain application in 30 minutes if you know the supply chain. So we're not talking about coding smart contracts or opening up a web browser and doing something. It's literally drag and drop with a visual modeler. So basically build a PowerPoint and then you have a blockchain app. So it's not confusing stuff. So we enable companies to do that, but the power is, again, that cross-organizational coordination that is right now not enabled, or it's enabled based on system integration, which is really, really messy and really, really costly. So right now, each company has their own database, and they call the berries customer ID here, and they call the berries by the berry genetic name over here, and they all have to figure out what language they're even talking about. But if you operate in a blockchain context, all that's standardized, and each time somebody adds something to the blockchain based on the berry, it's added to the berry, which is the asset, rather than their own database. So Driscoll's pick some berries, they say the poundage, they say the genetic modification, whatever it is, or the strain, that gets put on a truck. That truck ID gets put on that berry digital asset. Then that truck delivers it, and the retailer or the distributor or the terminal says that it's arrived. That arrived is also put on that berry. So all of a sudden you have this provenance or this history of the asset along a workflow. So when something's gone wrong or you have some reconciliation problem, you just go back and look at the asset, and all that information is already there. So the applications are, one, you get rid of airplane hangars worth of people that are just spending their jobs reconciling these problems. And you can repurpose them back into the core business, so that's operational efficiency right there. If you have the entire provenance and the history of that berry or that fruit or that food or that meat, you can command a premium for that product, assuming that consumers will pay more, which the studies say that like 30% more on average. So you command a premium for your provenance-informed products. So you have top line. You get some operational efficiency. You also get trust and transparency with your consumers. So I would love to know where my milk is coming from, or where there was a great example earlier, like how many friends my free-range chicken had. Whether it was 10 or 3, maybe that's a sad farm, and I don't want to buy that. And so knowing that, I'll pay more, and also I will start having brand loyalty. To be determined, I think that's to be tested. But some of the applications in the industry, obviously, we're going to scan a QR code and see exactly what's happening to our product. And I think a lot of you were in the earlier session, but we did one use case where we tracked yellowfin tuna from Fiji all the way to Brooklyn and served it to 1,000 people. So fresh sushi, where they could scan a QR code and know exactly where it was caught in the fresh, sustainable waters of Vanuatu, where it was processed, the FedEx truck number that it was on, who accepted the delivery, which was myself. And then the interesting part was when the consumers were scanning the QR code and they could see this history, the geolocation of when the fish was caught, where it was caught. It wasn't like, wow, this is amazing, I feel so elated. It was total confusion. It was like, well, is 2 days a good thing? How do I know whether it was cold? Who processed it? There seems to be a break in the supply chain right here. So as consumers start getting more in touch with the supply chain, rather than just going to a grocery store and assuming all the hard work's done, I think the companies are going to be able to react and respond to the new consumer needs, which they didn't even know they needed, which was a really cool insight.
So when you say it's on the berry, that's like on the QR, on the pack?
A digital version. So you have to create a digital version of the physical. So whether it's on the package or whether it's an RFID tag attached to the fish, or whether it's a QR code on the burlap sack of the rock samples that are brought down from the mining fields of a mining company, you just have to create that linkage somewhere.
Very interesting. So
There's a lot of information, sorry.
yeah, there'll be a quiz after.
Yeah.
So one of the things you talked about is the power of the technology, but then you get into consumer acceptance and the possibility for confusion.
Yeah.
Because to date, part of the deal with a trusted brand is you say that everything's been taken care of. It's healthy, it's safe, it's depending upon what's on the label, that it's meeting those customer preferences. It's non-GMO, or it's organic, or is raised by gnomes or whatever. Now you're talking about something, you have a whole different level where you're not providing a lot of information, but maybe too much information, or it just raises more questions. So what do you see as the opportunities? I mean, where does brand come in this world where there's all this information? Where are there opportunities for companies to provide that context? What do you see?
I think we're moving from show me or tell me to show me. The industrial media complex of the large CPG companies is coming to an end. People aren't trusting companies when they say, oh, natural, made in a wonderful farm. Here, it's like, okay, well, me as a consumer, I hear that and I go, okay, well, we've heard this before. So now I think that consumers are going to be demanding it. There's going to be a subset of companies that provide that information, and that's going to become the norm. So the large CPG companies and all the other food companies that may or may not be represented here, I think they're going to gauge whether their customers care, one. And if they do, they're going to respond by making their supply chains more transparent. And then that messaging or that storytelling is going to be, there's going to be a job called blockchain storytelling supply chain in the future. Because that messaging, what should that look like? Should it be boring and digital, like an Excel spreadsheet, or it should be a video that they can go online, or should it be in store? And then
I think the future's in holograms.
yeah, maybe.
You got the cow.
Yeah, the actual cow.
Right.
That's hard to do because manufacturing processes, you mix a lot of that. Yeah, we've had that problem in the past, but I don't know. What do you think from a legal perspective? Because the more information, the more digging, the more the FDA gets involved, the more the regular questions that come.
I mean, I think those can be handled. Those don't concern me that much because we're looking for other ways to pull back the label and show who we are and what has gone into making the product, because that's what consumers want. And I think technology may enable that in a way far better than what are fairly primitive things we've done before. Like we've got a scan on our clamshells where it will tell you what farm it's from. And I've seen in the tomato industry, they'll actually show who packed the fruit, one company in Mexico. But they're really, primitive things.
Yeah.
But I think what's important is consumers want this, and we struggle as a company figuring out how to do it. One of our company values is humility, and so we don't really like talking about ourselves much, and it's taken us a while to realize that, there's some really cool stories that if we could go beyond the brand, because we don't want to just say, trust us, we're Driscoll, but tell the story of, probably 80% of our growers start out as farm workers and are Mexican American origin. And berries are a crop that lends itself to starting out with very small crops. And so there are a lot of good stories that we would think consumers would embrace, but we struggle with the delivery vehicle that is both remains humble and authentic, and then because of the authenticity, trusted. So if technology enables that, that's all the best. But what really it's driven by is that's what people want.
So, perhaps, and because I was on the other panel during your blockchain discussion, you probably talked about the big announcement that Walmart is requiring or will be requiring all of its leafy green suppliers to get on a blockchain platform going forward. What about other uses other than, I presume that's for traceability and recall? What about some of the other things? For instance, there was another organization, the name escapes me now, that announced that it's developed a sustainability platform and then a climate change resilient supply chain platform. I mean, with the various changes that exist, both consumer demand for sustainability and environmental protection, and also agricultural lands and so forth being affected by climate change. What do you know of that's out there, and what do you see coming down the pipe?
Yeah, sure. I'll take the first crack at this one. There's an exponential amount of use cases out there. So you just type in blockchain and whatever industry you're in, and you'll get a list created by Deloitte or Accenture or one of these consulting firms that have 100 blockchain use cases, which they will consult and build one for you. I think very, very cool applications. The trust and transparency, provenance tracking is probably number one. We're seeing this with pharmaceutical issues, DSCSA regulation. We're seeing this, we're at a food forum right now. So the article in The Economist about honey 2 weeks ago, the production has gone down by 30%, but the output has, or the production has gone down by 35%, but the consumption has almost doubled. So how does that happen? The math doesn't work. So that honey is one of the most fraudulent foods out there. So why? How? Well, you can prove it with blockchain that you are actually getting this honey. The bees are here at this point. You're harvesting it at the correct time. You have this much came out of your farm, and this much went into the supply chain. Then you can start getting rid of the bad actors, but just because they can't provide the data. So I think that's a great use case.
Although if I could interrupt
Yeah.
right there, because again, I wasn't at your program, and
Yeah.
Because of the gray hair, I'm the least qualified to be discussing blockchain. But
Yeah.
you said, for example, hey, look, here's the beekeeper.
Yeah.
And so it's not fraudulent because there's an entry that goes in.
Yeah.
I mean, so if you're a beekeeper who is taking 60% honey and mixing it with 40% sugar solution or whatever else,
Yep.
how does blockchain capture that?
So it can do it in a bunch of different ways. By opening up your supply chains and making them transparent, anyone, I think in the future this will happen, anyone can audit you, and anyone can start raising questions. So if you have 50 beehives, I'm not sure what they're called, but like the stacks with bees in them, and the average beehive is only supposed to produce 1 pound of honey a season, then you should have 50 pounds of honey that you sell. So theoretically, your books are open, your supply chain is open, as much information is open as possible. But if you're saying that you're selling 100 pounds, where did that other 50 come from? So you can start using AI to analyze different supply chains and look for these anomalies. Or say you produce 50 pounds every single year for the last 5 years. That is like, we're talking about agriculture, we're talking about nature here, that will never ever happen. That it'll be 45 one year, it'll be 30 the next, it'll be 60 the next. So if there's no, so you can have AI perform checks on all of these supply chains, or just people that are interested, want to know where their food's coming from, can start asking these questions. Another use case that I think is going to change the world is land registry and land title. So Hernando de Soto wrote this book called Mystery of Capital, and it basically said that credit is the #1 factor of raising people out of poverty. And if you have access to credit, you can improve your land, you can buy new land, you can borrow to make your business more productive. And a lot of the world outside of the donut, which is America, doesn't have the systems in place to enable people to own their land and therefore borrow against it, which is their largest capital asset. So by registering a deed on the blockchain that says that they own that piece of property, then the bank can say, okay, I have a global ledger and everyone agrees that you own this property. I'm going to lend you money against it. Obviously, there's a lot of geopolitical problems or challenges that come along with that. But when you do that, you can enable literally 1 billion people to just raise out of poverty because now they have an asset that they can lend against and be more productive in their business. That fascinates me. And although we're a Providence tracking platform, we're building a land registry in Asia Pac and 2 in India right now using our technology. So it's basically a supply chain. You create that land registry, and then you transfer ownership, and then you do a capital improvement on your property, and that all the permits that you need are attached to that, so they get transferred along with it. You don't need to dig in your drawers and get those. So they're just voting on the blockchain, one person, one vote. You can eliminate fraud that way. I mean, the use cases are just insane. I could talk for 2 more hours about this.
And I wish we had the time. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I guess George has been called away for something. One of the things that he had shared earlier, and I was going to ask him about here, there's been this disruption in which new entrants are coming in and eating the lunch of many established companies. Not all. We have some very successful, highly successful, well-established companies represented in this room, thankfully. But a lot of those companies are establishing innovation hubs, particularly either in the Bay Area or near you in Brooklyn.
Yep.
What in the ecosystem is driving some of these old line companies to say, well, we're going to go there. I mean, these are obviously there's a lot of technical talent, but not necessarily people that know about strawberries or honey or whatever else it is.
Well,
it's a great place to live. But
it is, and we're just over the hill from Silicon Valley. So if you go over Highway 17 and drop down, that's where we are. So we're pretty close to a lot of that. And there's been a great interest over the last couple of years among venture capitalists and others to get into the ag space, they always tell me. You know, we see promising there, including in specialty crops, fruits and vegetables, which are so diverse that it's often scared them. My snarky response to that is they think we're all a bunch of hicks and that there's money to be made that we've left on the table, you know? And maybe I'm wrong, and it's not that there aren't technologies, but it's also not like these companies wouldn't embrace the technology. So I am a little skeptical of some of the discovery of at least the produce world, because I think it's sort of driven by that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think that the people that are feeding us globally, people are smart in general, and if you give them a technology that could help make them more money or help their family, they will use it. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's much at all lack of like tech needed in the produce industry. Sure, that there's going to be innovations like drip irrigation, mm-hmm. Using less water, using less pesticides, open source, farming practices could be a cool subject. But I mean, last week I was out in the Bay Area at Procter & Gamble's venture pitch, and they had a brief of 100 things that they want to get solved, and we pitched against some of them. But I think I said this acronym earlier. Millennials are nesting. Stands for NEST, so natural, ethical, sustainable, and transparent. So the issue is that these large CPG companies have been reliant on the trust us, and we have for a long, long time. But now there's technology that enables us to trust and verify, like Reagan. And so there's other companies that are just making these claims, like The Honest Company, for example, with a valuation of, how many billion now? And they're just saying that they're honest and organic, but the proof isn't really even there for some of these
right, and then they had a bad day in court.
And then they had a really bad day in court, and their valuation hasn't gone down $1. So the venture community is looking at these bloated CPG margins and saying, let's go after them with this differentiator. And the CPG companies are saying, well, we've traditionally been adverse to social media and engaging, like showing the internals because we have this wonderful marketing. And now we kind of don't have that skill set. So there's the Unilevers that are buying the Dollar Shave Clubs of the world to buy the innovation, which is what Sent said earlier. So what's driving it, I think, is nipping at the heels of this constant nipping at the heels. But on the contrary, a lot of these large companies have amazing supply chains that cannot be duplicated very easily at all by even the larger billion-dollar entrants. So if they can find a way to leverage them and make them more transparent, that is like competing against Goliath with the slingshot. And that's what we're trying to help these companies do, because that is an incredible competitive advantage and can change their story. So I think that's why they're doing all of this, is because it's coming. The change is coming. But there's a lot of opportunity.
Right. I was going to ask George, so I get to ask the empty chair, I guess, about clean meat and some of these new technologies. Yeah. Is the audience familiar with the term cell-based or clean meat? So I see some head nodding. For those of you who aren't, it's taking animal cells, culturing them in a lab, and then creating, so it's a meat product that is actually derived from animal cells, but it doesn't have hooves. And the part of the issue now is that it hasn't been scaled at a competitive cost. Yeah. So I think right now the pricing is $18,000 per meatball. Is what I last saw. So obviously, once you get over the kind of yuck factor of something grown in a lab, but the premise is, and you have some smart money going into this, the idea that in the future you aren't going to have the land or to fight environmental degradation that comes from large-scale livestock farming, et cetera, to feed the world, you're going to need something else. So whether it's plant-based protein, or whether it's clean meat, I'm sure George could put his finger on it, and I'll throw it out to you, but then I'm going to ask the audience too, because I'm sure we've got people here who really know this stuff. But any insights on that?
I have almost no insights in it, but there was one point. I went to a New York Times food conference a couple of years ago. You might think that that's all I do is go to these food conferences. But and there were companies kind of selling this kind of stuff. I don't remember if it was actually clean meat, and that's a new term to me, but it struck me as not that much different than the biotech industry. Here's something new, very different way of doing it, but they were cool, and they had venture capital money, and somehow it seemed like the acceptance almost depended on who was pitching it to them. Was it these cool guys in jeans, or was it corporate guys, because we'll accept one and not the other? And
So you're saying I'd be toast if I went
yeah,
in it?
absolutely. But it just struck me as stepping away or stepping back 10 years, I wouldn't have thought cell-based meat would be seen as sort of on the cool side of the spectrum. I would have thought it would be way over here in the I'm not going anywhere near that,
Right.
like cloning Dolly was.
Right.
And yet it's not that way, and I just find that really fascinating, and I don't know what to make of it, so I'll just throw it out there.
All right. Well, as a nester,
Yeah.
what's your take on it, Tyler?
So I was also on a panel yesterday. So I guess all I do is go sit on these panels in San Francisco at the Institute for Future Technology, and they had something called the Baconator, and that was where you grow your
like it.
bacon. So you press a button, and by the morning you have 2 pieces of grown bacon. I think that's incredibly odd, but I think we'll get. Why wouldn't?
Talk them into bringing it with you here
And-
so you can demonstrate?
It was so.
And the appeal of that is what?
For the consumer, it's more convenient than going to the store and buying bacon.
That's true. Okay.
And if there's less environmental impact, you don't have to slaughter an animal. There's the CO2, fossil fuel, or carbon emissions, yay or nay. Who knows what's going to happen? The Impossible Burger, I think it's what it's called, is out there. But if you look at the ingredients, it's really confusing to know how they're making it taste like the way it tastes with all those ingredients, and I don't even know what half of them are.
It's what's
It's like
heme or whatever that is.
Yeah,
the
that makes
thing
the
that
red
makes it red
and tastes like meat.
right.
I haven't had one. I would love to try one, but I don't know whether I would incorporate it into my diet every day.
We were going to serve it at lunch, but
I would have tried it. That would have been great, but yeah, I'm not sure. I'm sure there's people here who are way more educated.
a question for which this group is going to be uniquely unqualified to speak.
Yeah.
We have, originally we had Jeffrey Verwerk from Cargill, who was going to speak here, and she got called away, unfortunately, because this is UN week, and so she's speaking on behalf of Cargill with a number of foreign dignitaries at the UN. And so then we have, an all-male group here. The food industry as a whole has been slower than some to promote women and all the rest. So I'm going to actually throw it out there. What do we see in that, and does this era of change democratize it to, maybe that's an overused word, does it make it more likely that the glass ceiling is going to be broken in the food industry? Any perspectives out there? Because I said we just disqualified ourselves from answering the question. No one?
We have a woman CEO. Who was a CEO for COO for a long time, so.
Right.
Not something.
I'll provide a tech perspective.
Yep.
So this is probably a concept that's very, very new for most of you, or maybe even heard of it, but it's called self-sovereign identity. So if I asked if any of you thought you had an identity, a digital identity, you'd probably say yes. I have a Google email address, I have a Facebook account, I have an Instagram, I have a LinkedIn, but I would argue that they all own your identity, and that with a flip of a switch or a bad electrical outage, your identity could be wiped. And so I would argue that once you have a self-sovereign identity, which you manage, and it's persistent, which means it never goes away because it's on the public blockchain, and it's portable, which means you can take your reputation or your rating, your Uber rating, everywhere you go, rather than Uber maintaining that Uber rating for you and that identity. And if they don't like you, then that Uber rating, those 10,000 trips you took is gone. You can take that with you. I think it's going to drastically democratize how markets work, because right now we have this trust framework that's between people with maybe resumes or a referral here and there. But if you have concrete, this person has driven this many routes, this person has worked at these 5 companies and received X, Y, and Z ratings, this person is, certified based on a certification that is industry-wide. Like, I'm going to create my business around smart contracts that says if anybody is above this rating, they can participate in this market, which is driving from here and there. I don't care whether it's a woman, whether it's a man, if they're young, if they're old, whatever. So it's going to dehumanize the process, but maybe rehumanize the process.
Or it's going to be...
Is a robot speaking to us?
It's a robot. Yeah, it's going to take all
Is
of
the
our
future
jobs.
here?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, as you're saying that, I'm sitting there saying, is this a good thing or a bad thing?
I think
Yeah.
net good, because you probably still have those biases, but if you can programmatically eliminate those biases, I think that's net good.
But the other trend going on is more concern over privacy.
Yeah,
And-
so identity on the blockchain does not mean lack of privacy. So you could have an identity for your work. You could moonlight as a lead of a band that you don't want your colleagues, professional colleagues, to know about. That could be an identity for you as well. And in that sphere of band, you could have a 10-star lead singer, small jazz club rating, and take that with you. And then you'll also have a professional driving one and take that with you. And nobody knows. You could say that your name is Jack one time and your name is Lindsay in another. Doesn't matter.
But it's still facilitating the
Yeah.
dissemination of that information, whatever that is.
Technically, you don't have to give away anything. It could be an if-then statement. So if you went to a bar, right now you give them your whole license. They know your name, your address, how old you are, your birthday. But in the future, you go to a bar and they go, are you 21 or not? You give them a blank sheet of paper. It reads it. It says, it does a command. What's your birthday? Over, under 21, yes or no? Return yes. So the bar, all the bouncer says is yes. They don't see anything. So it's just a programmatic.
You're kind of scaring me here, Tyler.
Yeah.
I might have to go back to strawberries in a big hurry.
Yeah.
You got a
Yeah.
question there?
Yeah, please.
Talking about privacy,
Yeah.
you're talking about having all of this for like your product attached to your product. Well, what about the manufacturers? I mean, do you really want everybody to see every single one of your ingredients? If a competitor can, if I can go buy your product that you manufacture, scan it, and know every single one of your manufacturer and what kind of product ingredients you used, what kind of competitive advantages go away with that?
Just to repeat the
Yeah.
question, as I recall it, is, if everything is out there on the blockchain, but of course everything wouldn't have to be on there.
Yep.
That if everything is out there, then don't you lose your competitive advantage? You lose your trade secrets. You have all your ingredient lists. So what material doesn't have to be on the blockchain, and what would you keep off, and how would you address
Yeah.
the privacy and competitive advantage question?
That's a great question, to be determined. I think the consumer is going to demand certain things. I think that the companies are going to respond with certain demands as well. Obviously, maybe I don't put all of my manufacturers on there, but maybe I just put the ingredients. If the manufacturers aren't important, if they are important, then the consumers are going to demand that information, and then another company is going to create a operational framework in which that can be transparent. I also think that we're going to consolidate, and people are going to come together and co-op more, because with the enablement of global inclusion and frictionless trade, why do we need a middleman to sell us paper towels when we can just get together and say our AI says that I buy 10 paper towels a month, and you guys all do too. Let's just go to a manufacturer and eliminate a middleman and get rid of a brand. So I think we could co-op more. I mean, more of like the Land O'Lakes model or the Driscoll's model.
Now you can be scared too.
No, I think it's a good thing for the facilitators of co-ops.
Great. Well, we have a few minutes remaining, so I'm sure there's some questions out there, so fire away. I've been having all the fun up here, and when I've kind of turned my shoulder, I wasn't always paying attention. So, Aaron, you've got to have a question. Okay, you don't. All right.
I have a question.
Anand, yeah. Okay, please.
Question 2 minutes ago was something around breaking the glass. Yeah, question was around breaking the glass ceiling in
Yeah.
the food industry.
Yeah.
Can anybody talk about how is it manifesting itself today? What is the glass ceiling in the food industry, and how is it manifesting itself, and
Right.
in what way is it a problem? Because I just don't know.
Right. And it's a great question, and before I ask the question, I should have done my homework to get the right percentages, but the numbers that I've seen would suggest that among industry sectors, women are underrepresented in senior leadership roles in the food industry. I'm not sure I know why, because there have, until recently, the CEO of Campbell's was female. There are, female leaders in a number of successful companies, but as a whole, and I'm not sure on these statistics where the cutoff was for senior management, but less represented. Now, fortunately, you look around this room, this is a group of leaders, people who are in senior capacity, and it's a much more diverse group than those numbers would indicate. Any other thoughts? Questions? Ready to go out and put your blockchain identity to work? All right.
How many of you did I confuse? Apologies.
No,
All right. Well, let me just finish. I have one bit of housekeeping before I let you all go. First of all, on behalf of Dorsey and Whitney, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today for this program. I hope you found it educational, interesting, informative, entertaining. And what we'd ask you to do, you're going to get a survey from us that's going to ask you for some feedback. And I know all of us get these things. You fly in an airplane and you get the thing immediately. Would you recommend the airline to your best friend? But this is important to us. We want to make these programs relevant to all of you and focused. And so if you'd take the time, it's not going to take a long, but take the 5 minutes to provide us candid feedback, what you thought we did right, what we thought we did wrong. If your answer is that this particular moderator was atrocious, then you can just email that to me directly. But we would appreciate that feedback. And again, I'd like to thank our panelists. I'm sorry that George could not come back and join us, but I'd like to thank Tyler Mulvihill, and I'd like to thank Tom O'Brien for joining us. Let's give him a round of applause.